Looking back now, I never would have guessed my life would spiral into a mess like this. For the longest time, I thought Emma and I were just another happy couple, normal like everyone else. Sure, we had our disagreements, but nothing out of the ordinary. At least, that's what I convinced myself of. We had just moved into a new neighborhood, thinking it was a fresh start. I figured it was the perfect place to settle in, meet the neighbors, and build a peaceful life together. And for a while we quickly hit it off with James and Sophia, the couple next door. James? I'll give him this. He had that magnetic confidence, the kind that draws people in without even trying. He was a successful businessman, smooth as could be. It always seemed like he had everything figured out. Sophia, on the other hand, was more reserved, quieter, but still kind and sweet. I used to joke that they balanced each other perfectly. But looking back, I realized that balance was nothing more than a well-crafted illusion. At first, everything seemed fine, better than fine. Even Emma seemed more upbeat. Our weekends were spent exploring the town, trying out new places to eat, and taking long hikes. But, as with anything that looks perfect, cracks began to show. And they didn't just show up, they split wide open, and once I saw them, I couldn't unsee them. It all started with something small, almost unnoticeable. Emma began spending more time out with friends, something she hadn't done much of before. It's not that I minded her having her own space. I'm not that controlling. But when her girls' nights turned into her staying out late with excuses about work or traffic or just losing track of time, that was different. Then there was the phone thing. The damn phone. She kept it on silent 24/7. Emma used to leave her phone around, not really caring where it was. Now, it was always in her hand or buried deep in her bag, as if she was hiding something. I get privacy, sure, but this felt off. She'd get these texts, right? Her face would light up. She'd smile a little, type a response, and then suddenly her expression would drop when she noticed me looking. She got good at hiding it. At first, I thought I was just overreacting. You know that feeling, the one in your gut that nags at you, but you try to push it away, convincing yourself you're just being paranoid. That was me for months. Her attitude changed too. Emma used to be the one who suggested date nights, who would snuggle up on the couch, who would make plans. Now, it felt like she couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me. Our conversations were cold, distant. It wasn't just the usual issues. There was this empty space between us. It was as if she was there physically, but emotionally miles away. I started to feel like I was just floating through the house, invisible to her. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just stress from work, just a phase. But every time I convinced myself it would get better, something else would happen to prove me wrong. One night, Emma came home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. Maybe she'd brushed past someone at a bar or hugged a friend, but it was too strong to be accidental. And that's when I knew something was really wrong. I'm not proud of it, but I started doing things I never thought I would. I kept an eye on her, checked when she'd leave and come back. Looked at her calendar to see if her late work nights actually lined up with what she told me. At first they did, until one day they didn't. That's when I saw her meeting with James. Yeah, good old James, our charming neighbor. I followed her that day, and honestly, it felt insane. Like I was losing my mind, becoming the guy I never thought I'd be. But I couldn't help it. She was acting so strangely, and my brain was spinning with possibilities. So, there I was keeping my distance, feeling like a lousy detective. And there they were, sitting together at a cafe, just a few blocks from our place. It wasn't a work meeting. It wasn't a friendly chat. The way they leaned in, the way she laughed at his jokes, it was like watching her on a date. Her smile, the way her eyes sparkled, all the little things that used to be for me, now directed at James. I felt this sick pit in my stomach like the ground was crumbling beneath me. I took the picture right then. A part of me thought maybe I was overreacting, jumping to conclusions. But deep down, I knew. I just knew. That was the first time I felt the raw, undeniable sting of betrayal. But it wouldn't be the last. No, this was only the beginning of the nightmare that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, and who Emma really was. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed to know more. I needed proof. And I couldn't talk to Sophia either. What was I supposed to say? Hey, just so you know, I think your husband is having an affair with my wife? No way. I had to stay quiet, at least for now. But the truth? Keeping that anger bottled up was tearing me apart. Everywhere I went, I saw Emma and James in my mind, laughing, talking, touching. Every time I looked at her, I felt nauseous. Every time I saw James, I wanted to punch that smug smile right off his face. But on the outside, I kept it together. On the inside, I was a wreck, angry, confused, and yeah, a little scared. Scared of what was coming next. Scared of how it would change everything. One afternoon, while I was walking around the neighborhood trying to clear my head, I ran into Sophia. She was out walking her dog. For a second, I thought about just nodding and moving on. How could I look her in the eye, knowing what I knew about her husband? But she called out to me, and there was no turning back. So I played it cool, made small talk, asked how she was doing. I watched her as she spoke. There was something about her, a gentle quality, soft and shy. But there was also a sharpness behind her eyes, like she saw more than she let on. Maybe it was just me, but I could have sworn I saw sadness in her eyes. It was like she was carrying some heavy burden of her own. That's when it hit me. Maybe Sophia already knew. Maybe she had her suspicions. Or maybe, just like me, she was trying to make sense of a life that was slipping out of control. So, I decided to test the waters. I brought up relationships casually, like I was just making small talk. I asked how things were going with her and James, mentioned how busy Emma had been with work, and that's when she let her guard down. She sighed and gave me a tired smile before admitting that things had been distant between her and James. He'd been distracted lately, working late, always preoccupied. Sound familiar? Yeah, it was like hearing an echo of my own marriage. But what really struck me was the way she said it, as though she'd gotten used to it, as though she convinced herself this was just how things were. She went on about how she trusted James, how they'd been through rough patches before, but he'd always been loyal in the end. I wanted to scream, to shake her, and tell her to wake up, but I held myself back. I couldn't just drop the bomb on her, not yet. But as she spoke, it became clear that she had no idea she was living the same lie I had been, trying to make sense of all the warning signs that had been there all along. And I hated it. I hated the look of hope in her eyes, knowing it was based on nothing but lies. That's when I knew I had to tell her. I couldn't let her stay in the dark when I knew the truth. Sophia, I said, and she must have noticed the change in my voice because she stopped talking mid-sentence and looked at me. There's something I need to tell you. It's about James and Emma. At first, she looked confused, then wary. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath. I couldn't hold it in anymore. They're having an affair. And just like that, the words hung in the air like poison. For a moment, I thought she was going to faint. She blinked, shook her head, like she was trying to process what I'd just said, refusing to believe it. That's not possible, she stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You must be mistaken. James wouldn't. Sophia, I interrupted. I wish I was wrong. I really do. But I'm not. I've seen them. I told her how I'd followed Emma one day and caught her meeting with James. They were together, and it wasn't just a casual chat. It was intimate. She still didn't believe me. She shook her head, looking at me like I was crazy, like I was making the whole thing up. So, I did what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture I'd taken at the cafe. The photo didn't lie. You could see Emma leaning into James, the way he touched her arm. It was all there, clear as day. And when Sophia saw it, I could see the moment her world shattered. She grabbed the phone from my hand, staring at it as if she could make it disappear by sheer will. Her breath grew shallow, her eyes welled up, and then the anger came. She tossed the phone back at me, muttering, "That son of a bitch." We sat there for a while, neither of us saying anything. What could we say? Our lives, our marriages, everything we thought we knew had just been torn apart in an instant. And as much as I loathed James and Emma, my heart broke for Sophia. She didn't deserve this. Neither of us did. But when the tears stopped, when the shock wore off, something else took over. Anger. Raw, unfiltered rage. Sophia clenched her fists, staring off into the distance. I could see the wheels turning in her head. They think they can just get away with this, she muttered. They think we're just going to sit back and let them do this to us. I shook my head. Not a chance, I said. They're not going to get away with it. We're going to make them pay. That's when we came up with a plan. It sounds crazy, I know, but we were running on pure emotion at that point. Revenge was the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt right. And the plan was simple. We needed to make sure they caught us together, make sure they walked in on us at a moment they could never forget. Let's set a trap, Sophia said, her voice low and fierce. Let's make sure they see it all. Let them feel what we've been feeling. I nodded, feeling the same fire in my chest. I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control. It was about showing them they couldn't destroy our lives and walk away without consequences. And yeah, maybe it was about feeling something, anything other than the pain they'd caused us. So we started plotting. We found the right night, the perfect Friday night when we knew James and Emma would be out, probably doing their usual thing, sneaking around while pretending to be somewhere respectable. We made sure they'd be out long enough for us to make it happen. When they came home, they'd find us together. We'd make sure they saw everything, made them understand just how badly they'd screwed up. Looking back, I don't know if everything we did was right. Honestly, I don't care. All I knew at that moment was that it felt like the only way to reclaim a little bit of the life they'd stolen from us. And we were ready to do whatever it took. I'll tell you, planning revenge is a hell of a lot easier than living it. When Sophia and I sat there, making our plans to tear down their affair, it all seemed so clear. Get together. Make sure they see us. Let them feel the burn. Simple. But the closer we got to that night, the more I realized how much more complicated it all was. How much pain we were both carrying. But we were committed. No turning back. We picked the date carefully, a Friday night when we knew they'd be out. Probably doing the same thing they always did, sneaking around behind our backs while pretending to be somewhere else. They always did. And sure enough, Emma stuck to her usual routine. She told me again that she had to work late, some big project or some nonsense. I just nodded, pretending to buy it, offering that fake supportive smile. She probably thought I still believed her. Meanwhile, Sophia mentioned that James had a networking dinner, and when he left that night, I knew exactly what was happening. They were doing exactly what we'd planned. When Sophia showed up at my place, the air between us was thick with tension. We both knew what was coming. We knew what we had to do, but that didn't make it any easier. There was this heavy silence, this quiet weight that hung between us. Nervousness, anger, and a touch of sadness all mixed together. I remember Sophia just standing there for a second, staring at me, like she was trying to figure out what to say, but couldn't find the words. I didn't know what to say either, so I just motioned for her to come in. I poured us both a drink, and we sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity, letting everything sink in. After a while, we started talking, not about the plan, but about everything else. About our lives, about the pain we were feeling. Sophia opened up in a way I hadn't seen before. She talked about feeling invisible in her own house, how James's touches had become mechanical, like he wasn't really there with her. I told her about Emma's smile, how it had become distant, how she used to look at me like I was the only one that mattered. Now, it felt like I was just there, just a presence in the background. It's hard to explain, but talking with Sophia, sharing that raw truth with someone who understood, it felt like I was peeling away layers of numbness I didn't even know I had built up. And it wasn't just about getting back at them anymore. It became something else entirely. It was about finding a little bit of comfort in someone who was hurting just as much. Before I knew it, we were holding each other, clinging to each other like if we let go, we'd both fall apart. And maybe we would have. The kiss wasn't planned. It just happened like it was the most natural thing in the world. 1 second, we were talking, and the next our lips were on each other. For just a moment, all the anger, all the betrayal, it melted away. It was just the two of us, lost in each other, trying to forget everything else. I'm not going to pretend it was some magical moment. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't perfect. It was messy. It was real. And it was exactly what we both needed. One thing led to another, and suddenly, we were in my bed, tangled up in a way that felt both desperate and freeing. I wasn't thinking about James or Emma or the mess we were creating. All that mattered was that Sophia and I were in this together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could escape. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was driven by this mix of pain, anger, and an unspoken understanding that we were both broken in our own ways. Maybe this was our way of trying to put the pieces back together, even if we didn't know how. We didn't know when they'd be back, but we made sure we were ready. The plan was simple. Let them see us together. Let them see what we were doing. And then I heard the door open. I heard James laughing about something, and Emma's familiar voice chiming in. My heart was hammering in my chest. Sophia must have felt it too, because she squeezed my hand, her eyes saying everything. We've got this. And then it all played out like some kind of slow-motion disaster, and I couldn't stop watching. They walked in right into the living room, and there we were on the couch. Sophia's back was to them, but I could see their faces. Shock, disbelief, rage. James froze for a second, his eyes wide like he couldn't process what he was seeing. Emma, oh Emma. Her expression twisted with fury, disgust, and disbelief, like I was the one who had betrayed her. And then everything exploded. James lunged at me, shouting something incoherent. I barely had time to roll off the couch before he swung at me, missing by inches. I pushed him back, and suddenly we were both on our feet, fists raised, ready to fight. Are you out of your mind, Alex? James screamed, his voice cracking like he couldn't believe what was happening. Am I out of my mind? I shot back. How long have you been sleeping with my wife, James? How long? Emma started screaming, her voice high-pitched, sharp. How could you do this to me, Alex? After everything we've been through. I laughed bitterly. Oh, you mean like all those late nights with James? How could I do this? Maybe it's time you explain yourself for once. Sophia, still sitting there, wrapped in a blanket, stared at James with a look that could kill. I guess now you know how it feels, she said coldly, her voice unwavering despite the chaos. The shouting went on forever. Accusations, insults, curses flying from all sides. James and Emma tried to turn it around, tried to make Sophia and me the villains, but we didn't back down. We laid everything out, every lie, every secret, and in that moment I saw the realization hit them. I saw it in their eyes, the guilt, the shame. They couldn't fight it anymore. The truth was right there, undeniable, and it was tearing them apart. James charged at me one last time, and I shoved him back so hard he stumbled and knocked over a lamp. Emma screamed and rushed to James's side like I'd just attacked her precious lover. And in that moment, I knew I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the excuses. Let them have each other. They deserved whatever came next. Sophia and I walked out of that house, leaving James and Emma to their own mess. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like everything was falling apart. I felt free. And yeah, it was chaotic. It was messy. But it was real. Whatever happened next, I was ready for it. Confronting the truth doesn't always make things better. It's not like ripping off a Band-Aid and letting the wound heal. It's more like throwing yourself into the fire and hoping you come out stronger. But that was only the beginning. What came next was the start of something ugly, a war that tore everything apart. The morning after, I woke up in my own bed, but it felt like a stranger's. Emma hadn't come back, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. I figured she was with James or somewhere else, probably scrambling to figure out how to spin the whole mess into something that wasn't her fault. I could only imagine the conversation they were having, how they'd twist everything to blame me, to blame Sophia. But honestly, I didn't care. Let them twist the story however they wanted. It didn't change what they'd done. Around midday, the storm finally hit. Emma came storming in, bursting through the door like a whirlwind, her face flushed and her eyes wide with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice cracking like she was already on the verge of tears. "How could you do this to us?" To me? I stayed silent on the couch, staring blankly at her. I didn't flinch. I wasn't that guy anymore, the one who would bend over backward trying to keep things peaceful. I let her yell, let her rage. She could scream until her lungs gave out, but I was done. I wasn't taking the blame anymore. She kept going, breathless now, waiting for me to react. I didn't. Instead, I finally spoke, my tone cold and distant. "You done?" I asked, watching her stand there, mouth open, no words left. Her eyes narrowed, confused by my lack of reaction. I stood up slowly, walked toward her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked her straight in the eye. No fear. No hesitation. You want to talk about betrayal, Emma? I said, my voice low but sharp. About how you ruined everything we had. You're coming in here after everything you did, and you want to play the victim? I laughed bitterly, the sound of it slicing through the silence. Do you even hear yourself? She shouted back. You slept with Sophia, as if that was her magic bullet. Like that would somehow shift the balance. You're no better than me, I said, my voice bitter. Yeah, I did. And you know why? Because you did it first. Because I was sick of living in this damn lie, pretending everything was okay when we both knew it wasn't. I paid you back, Emma. And honestly, you had it coming. For a second, her anger faltered, and I saw something else flicker in her eyes, shame. Guilt. It was a brief moment, but it was there, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't care about her tears. I didn't care if she was broken. What I cared about was making her face what she'd done, making her own up to it. It wasn't like that, she said weakly, trying to hold on to her story, but it was clear she was losing the battle. I didn't mean for this to happen, Alex. I was confused. I was lonely. You don't understand. I don't understand. I cut her off, stepping closer, my anger bubbling over. You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how you could do this to me, to our marriage. How you could look me in the eyes every damn day and lie to me. Don't even start with your excuses. You were lonely? Well, guess what? I was lonely too, but I didn't go sleeping with a neighbor. That was all you. She broke down then, her defenses crumbling as the tears started pouring. I'm sorry, she sobbed, her hands shaking as she reached out to touch me. I'm so sorry, Alex. I never meant to hurt you. Please, we can fix this. We can try again, I swear. Stop, I shouted, pulling away from her touch like it was burning me. There's no fixing this. No trying again. I'm done. You made your choice. And now you have to live with it. We both do. That was it. No dramatic final words. I walked away, leaving her standing there in her sea of tears and regrets. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to salvage. Nothing left worth fighting for. I was done pretending. The following days were a blur of chaos. Our neighbors got wind of everything. How could they not with all the yelling and slamming doors? Our quiet little street, once filled with polite hellos and neighborly chats, had turned into a battlefield. James came by a few times, all high and mighty, trying to confront me, but I wasn't having it. Go fix your own marriage, James, I told him, my patience running thin. Or don't. I don't care, but stay the hell out of my face. Sophia wasn't having any of it either. One night, I saw her and James yelling at each other in their driveway, and it hit me just how far we'd all fallen. What was once this perfect image of two happy couples was now just a wreck, a disaster. The lines were drawn, and there was no going back. The next week, Sophia filed for divorce, and I knew I had to follow suit. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life crash down. Lawyers, meetings, dividing everything we had, arguing over who gets what. None of it felt real, but it was, and I had to face it. Emma tried everything to win me back, calls, texts, showing up at the house unannounced. She begged for another chance, for counseling, for some kind of fresh start. It was pathetic. I had never seen her so desperate, so small. I didn't know if she was more afraid of losing me or the life we built together. But none of it mattered. My mind was made up. Why, Alex? She cried one day, standing in the kitchen, clutching a half-empty bottle of wine like it was the only thing holding her together. Why can't we just try? I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. Please. I love you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger. Someone who lied, who cheated, who tore everything we'd built apart. I don't love you anymore, Emma, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. That's final. And you don't love me? Her voice broke, a tiny sob escaping. Maybe you did once. Maybe I did too. But not anymore. And I'm not going to keep pretending like that's enough. She collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I didn't try to make it better. She didn't deserve my comfort. Not anymore. So, that was it. The end of our marriage. The end of the lies. And while it felt like I was being torn apart, I knew deep down that it was the right decision. I couldn't live in that nightmare anymore. The pretense that things could somehow go back to what they were, it was over. James and Emma could have each other. They deserved each other. Two people lost in their lies and deceit. Me? I was ready to let it all go. Burn everything down. Walk away and rebuild. I was ready to take back control of my life, step by step. Filing for divorce wasn't a relief. Not at all. It felt like stepping into a hurricane, knowing it would tear through everything that was left of my old life. If you think divorce is just signing a few papers and moving on, think again. It's a grueling, ugly process. With Emma, it felt like I was trapped in a never-ending war. I'll never forget my first meeting with the lawyer. I sat across from him, a guy who seemed too calm for what I was about to throw at him. I unloaded everything. The lies, the cheating, the confrontation. All of it. And when I did, it felt like tearing open an old wound that I'd tried to stitch shut, letting it all spill out in the sterile coldness of that office. My lawyer just nodded, scribbling notes, already planning out how we divide our lives in a way that worked for me. But the process? It was hell. Emma had no intention of letting this be easy. The second her lawyer got involved, any hope of a clean break vanished. Suddenly, it wasn't about the marriage anymore. It was about money, property, and who got what. She wanted the house, of course, and alimony. She argued that her career wasn't as stable as mine, and she needed support. I couldn't believe the gall of it. Here was this woman who had betrayed me for who knows how long. And now she was demanding that I fund her future? Absolutely not. We fought over everything. Every asset. Every possession. The car, the furniture, even the stupid coffee machine. Each time I heard from her lawyer, it felt like another stab to the chest. But I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything just to avoid a fight. I was done being the pushover. I fought back. I made sure my lawyer understood exactly what we were up against, and that we were going to push for an even split. Nothing more, nothing less. The arguments dragged on, bleeding into every part of my life. Work, sleep, even when I tried to get away from it all. It was always there, looming over me. Every time I thought we were close to wrapping it up, Emma would pull some new stunt, dragging the process out just a little longer. Maybe she thought I'd cave, that I'd give in, but I wasn't that guy anymore. Not after everything. I didn't hear much from James, at least not directly. Sophia and I had agreed from the start not to drag each other back into the mess. We both knew that whatever had happened between us was a fleeting moment, a burst of revenge, raw emotion, and pain. It wasn't something to build on, something to hang on to. It was just two people hurting, trying to find comfort in the wreckage. And that was okay. We didn't regret it, but we knew it wasn't the beginning of something new. Sophia and I stayed in touch, offering support as we both navigated our own divorces. But it was different. No drama, no expectations. Just two people understanding each other's pain and giving each other space to heal. And I think that was what we both needed. A friend who didn't ask for more than what we were ready to give. No strings attached. Just two survivors pulling themselves out of the ashes of what we once thought we'd have. That's when I started to try and get my life back little by little. It wasn't easy. Honestly, I didn't even know where to begin. For months, my world had revolved around Emma. Our marriage, the unraveling of it, and the mess we were both making. But now it was just me. Just Alex. And it was time to figure out who I was beyond the broken man I'd been. I threw myself into the gym. It wasn't about getting in shape anymore or looking good for anyone else. It was about finding an outlet for all the anger, frustration, and pain that had built up. I needed somewhere to sweat it out, to feel something other than the hurt that seemed to follow me everywhere. And it worked. Each workout felt like I was chiseling away at the parts of me that had been broken, rebuilding myself piece by piece. Some days were harder than others. Some days I just wanted to stay in bed, let the world pass by. But every time I pushed myself to go, to keep moving, I felt a little stronger, a little more like myself. Outside of the gym, I picked up old hobbies, things I had dropped over the years. I dusted off my guitar, started playing again. The music was a release, letting me drown out the noise in my head. I spent time hiking, fishing, anything that let me breathe, anything that got me out of my own head and away from the pain. I even started reconnecting with friends, guys I hadn't seen in years, all because I had gotten so wrapped up in my marriage. And damn, it felt good. It felt good to laugh, to hang out, to drink and talk without wondering where Emma was or who she was with. Every day, the weight on my shoulders got a little lighter. I started sleeping better, waking up without the familiar knot in my chest. Sure, the memories would sneak up on me sometimes, a flash of what we once had, and it hurt, but I was learning to let it pass, to not hold on so tightly, because holding on to the past was like holding a shard of broken glass. It just cuts you open, over and over again. The divorce itself still dragged on, but it became more like background noise. Emma and I were barely talking anymore. Everything went through our lawyers, and honestly, I was fine with that. Every day that passed, I felt the hold of that old life slip a little more, and a new horizon started to take shape, one that didn't have Emma in it. Funny thing about going through something like this, you change, not just in the ways you expect, but in ways you never saw coming. I didn't walk out of this with a new love or some fairy tale ending, but I walked out stronger, clearer, more sure of who I was and what I wanted. And for once, that felt like more than enough. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to fix someone else's life. I wasn't trying to salvage a broken marriage. I was just living, one day at a time, one step at a time. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, like the weight had finally been lifted, like I was finally free. The day my divorce was finalized wasn't some victory. It wasn't a celebration. It was just a quiet end to a long, brutal chapter. But once it was over, I felt a shift, like the storm had passed. Emma and I were done. The ties were cut. And all that anger, all the resentment I'd carried for so long, began to fade. I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to. I needed to let go. Life after the divorce was about rediscovery. I had to learn how to live for myself again, to rebuild a routine, to find joy in things that had nothing to do with her. I hit the gym harder than ever, picked up running, boxing, hiking, anything that made me feel alive again. I reconnected with old friends. I jammed on my guitar. I enjoyed the little things. Every step, every small moment brought me closer to the person I was meant to be. Sophia, and I didn't try to make anything more of our brief moment together. We were both moving forward in our own ways, supporting each other but keeping things platonic. We both needed a clean slate. I dated a bit, went out more, met new people, not rushing into anything, just living. And yeah, Emma's memory would still pop up, but the sting had faded. Instead of holding on to the past, I learned to let it go. I found comfort in my own company, in the life I was building. Every struggle, every sleepless night had shaped me into someone stronger, happier. And when I looked in the mirror, I finally recognized the person staring back at me. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about moving forward and finding peace in who I was now. And that was more than enough.